How do, and welcome back to Morrigan's Creations. I'm Mark, and today I wanted to go a little bit back to basics. And one of the first things that you learn in miniature painting is what's called dry brushing, and that's typically using a stiff bristle brush or soft, either one works. This is a cheap makeup brush, and the other thing that you typically use is kitchen roll, paper towel, stuff like that. And you load your brush up, rub off the excess on the paper towel, and you're just moving that around the model. Now there is actually a other option, and that is by using what's called a texture palette, and that allows you to visually see how much paint's left on your brush, and you're going to see how it's going to react with the model. So yeah, it's a quick video today, but I'm going to start by showing you how I made this, and then we're going to do a small comparison just showing using the paper towel method and using the texture palette. So one of the first things that you're going to need is something to make your palette out of, and for me that was using a baking tray that I got from the supermarket. Silly me, it's got a non-stick coating and I kind of want things to stick to it, so I went ahead and used a sanding stick just to remove that non-stick coating. I'd recommend using a respirator for this as well, as it does get a little bit dusty. So then what we're going to be doing is getting various bits of plastic, different materials, and we're just going to be gluing that all over this new board. Now I'm pretty sure that I found that piece just while I was out on a walk, and yeah, we just use super glue to stick that on. We're using super glue for a bit of everything now, and I'm using just little scraps that I found here and there. Some bits I got from the charity shop, other bits I bought for other projects, and you're going to want a big range of items, different textures, and that's just going to help add a bit of variety to the board. So I've added a bit of cork, and right here I'm using PVA glue, and if you actually add super glue over the top, it sort of congeals a bit and you get a bit of like a skin texture, a bit gory, but once you disturb it a little bit, really interesting texture. So I made sure that I added that here as well. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a bit of texture paste as well, because I love my texture paste, as well as adding a bit of that basic material. Now I didn't actually want to use too much of that texture paste, as it's a bit expensive when you compare it to like a homemade one like this blue stuff that you're seeing now. So I made sure that any gaps that I had, I filled with that. I then went ahead and sprayed it with a red primer, just so it's a bit more visible on camera. But right here we're going to be testing out the usual method, aka interactive ivory, and some kitchen roll. So what you'd normally do is you'd use makeup brush, stiff bristle brush, and you're just going to be working that paint into all the bristles that you can. And once you've got it all worked in throughout the entirety of your brush, you're actually going to want to start removing a lot of that paint. So what you usually do is rub the brush all over, and that's just going to be removing any of the excess until you're left with a tiny bit of paint left on the brush. Next, you're just going to rub this over the raised edges of your model. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. And what I tend to notice when I use kitchen roll, or paper in general, is it goes a little bit chalky and you do get a bit of a dusty effect as well. And sometimes you do actually get a little bit of that paper that sticks in the bristles and ends up on your model. So you can see that here. And it's kind of not the effect that I really wanted, so I decided that now I was going to test out the texture palette. We're going to go ahead and use the same method as usual, making sure that most of the bristles of the brush are coated in paint before adding a tiny bit of moisture, using a little bit of kitchen sponge, tiny bit of water added to it, and then we're just going to be working this over the texture palette. So by using a red primer and ivory, I can see really clearly how much is left on the brush, knowing exactly how it's going to react with the model. For me right here is the perfect amount of paint. So once you get to this point, you're going to want to be working this into the model, focusing mainly on the highest points. And because you've got only a tiny bit of paint left on the paintbrush, that's only going to pick out the raised areas, the points of detail. And because we've added that tiny bit of moisture, we're not going to get as chalky an effect as we did without. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of a comparison, just showing off the difference between using a texture palette and not using one. And that's just going to be showing up here. Now you could argue that it's a complete waste of time. And to be honest, the difference is quite subtle, but you're definitely making sure that you're not going to have them tiny bits of paper attached to your model. And to be honest, I think you have a lot more control when you use the palette. You know exactly how much is going to go on there. So now we've reached the end of the video. The main question I want to ask is it worth it? And to be honest, I think that's for you to decide. It's personal choice whether you decide that you want to use a texture palette or whether you don't. For me, I don't really do a lot of dry brushing in my paint jobs, as you've seen by obviously the Croxagore, Reikenor, stuff like that. But I think when I do actually come to do it, I will be using the texture palette. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you're going to be using one, if you already do use one, what are some of the positives that you've noticed from it? And honestly, some of the negatives as well, because I'm sure there's some of them as well. But with that, I'm going to call that the end of the video. Like I say, a bit of a short one today. Going to be working on a Dreadnought for the next video, so look out for that. We're going to be uploading on Saturdays now. Gives me a bit more time to do these voiceovers as well. So yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And yeah, see you next week.